Some of the most dangerous things a man can say don't sound dangerous at all. They slip out casually like throwaway lines. But if you listen closely, really listen, you'll hear something deeper. Not confidence, not conviction, but corrosion, slow, quiet erosion of discipline, self-respect, and integrity. There's a phrase I heard once from a man named Elliot, someone I used to work with years ago. Smart guy, sharp in meetings, always the first to volunteer for projects. But he had this one habit. Whenever something didn't go his way, he'd shrug and say, "That's just how the world works." At first, it seemed harmless, like realism. But over time, it became his excuse for everything. Lost a client? That's just how people are. Missed a deadline? That's just how the system's built. His words weren't observations, they were shields, ways to avoid reflection, accountability, or growth. And that's the truth most people overlook. Words are not just sounds, they're signals. Every phrase you repeat is like carving into stone, the stone of your character. Marcus Aurelius said, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." I believe it's more than just your thoughts, it's also your language. The words you reach for when no one's watching, the sentences you tell yourself after you fail. That's what defines the man. Stoic philosophy doesn't just teach you how to endure pain. It teaches you how to live with clarity, how to speak with restraint, and how to protect your soul from slow decay disguised as casual expression. You see, many men imagine strength as loud, as bold, as dominant. But the Stoics knew real strength was quiet and precise. It doesn't broadcast, it doesn't blame, and it doesn't repeat things that poison the very foundation of who you are. So let me ask you this. What phrases are you repeating to yourself right now? Are they sharpening you or sedating you? Are they lifting your standards or giving you permission to stay the same? Because every man, whether he admits it or not, is building a life sentence out of the words he uses. The only question is it a weapon that defends your purpose or a cage you've learned to decorate? This isn't about being perfect. It's about becoming conscious. Stoicism isn't cold, it's clear. And in that clarity, there's power. So before we go further, take a breath, listen to yourself, and ask, is my language building my strength or burying it? Part 1, I just need to get lucky. You've probably heard someone say it before. Maybe even caught yourself thinking it. I just need to get lucky. It sounds harmless, even hopeful. But beneath that thin layer of optimism is something far more dangerous, a quiet surrender of responsibility. I once knew a guy named Nathan. He sold insurance for a living. Bright, likable, and always chasing the next big break. Every time things didn't go as planned, he'd smile and say, "Man, I just need one lucky month. One client, one deal." But that one lucky break never came. Not because he wasn't capable, but because he stopped improving. He wasn't sharpening his pitch, studying the market, or investing in better systems. Instead, he kept throwing darts in the dark, waiting for fate to feel generous. Here's what most people miss. Luck isn't a strategy. It's not a plan. It's not even consistent. Stoic philosophy never dismisses the role of chance, but it refuses to worship it. Marcus Aurelius didn't say wait for fortune. He said, you must build your character as a fortress of the soul. And a fortress is built with hands, sweat, repetition, and patience, not lottery tickets. When we tell ourselves, I just need luck, we're not being hopeful. We're avoiding the harder questions. Am I prepared? Am I disciplined? Am I doing the boring, difficult work when no one's watching? Luck becomes a distraction from the brutal honesty we owe ourselves. Look around. The most lucky people you know, they're usually the most consistent, the most prepared, the ones who failed dozens of times in silence, while others waited for lightning to strike. And here's the truth. The man who blames his lack of progress on luck rarely sees the gold buried in daily practice. He doesn't notice that every skill built in obscurity, every quiet hour of mastery, is actually how you bend probability in your favor. So ask yourself this: if luck doesn't show up tomorrow, who would you become without it? Would you keep building anyway? Because Stoic men don't wait for the perfect wave. They train their balance. They strengthen their core. And when the wave finally comes, by fortune or by force, they ride it not with surprise, but with readiness. Hope is not a crime, but hoping without preparation, that's just passive regret with a smile on its face. If you're betting on something, bet on your ability to endure, adapt, and outlast. That's not luck. That's legacy. Part 2. That's just who I am. Few sentences sound more harmless and yet more limiting than this one. That's just who I am. It feels like a declaration of strength, of identity, but more often than not, it's just pride dressed up as permanence. And beneath that pride is fear, fear of change, fear of vulnerability, fear of growth. I remember someone who lived by that line. His name was Mark, a retired Army officer, a man who once commanded troops with razor-sharp discipline. He lived by routine, by duty, by order. But when he became a father, especially in this fast-moving digital age, something broke down. His teenage daughter tried to connect, asked for conversations, emotional openness, a little flexibility. Mark would always respond the same way. I'm not that kind of dad, that's just who I am. It sounded firm, but what it really meant was, I don't want to adapt. I'm afraid to be different. Over the years, their relationship became distant, not through arguments or drama, but through silence, through stubbornness, through emotional immobility. And when his daughter moved out, she didn't leave in anger. She just stopped, expecting him to change. The Stoics would call that a form of decay, not physical, but mental, emotional, philosophical. Seneca wrote, "As long as you live, keep learning how to live." And that hits harder the older you get, because life doesn't stop shaping you unless you stop listening. We often confuse consistency with character. But a man who repeats the same unexamined habits for 10 years isn't strong, he's stuck. Growth doesn't mean abandoning who you are. It means refining it, elevating it, testing it in new terrain. The truth is, that's just who I am is often used to excuse bad behavior, outdated beliefs, or emotional laziness. And every time you say it, you're building a cage out of your own past, locking yourself into an outdated version of you that no longer fits the world you're living in. A Stoic man doesn't fear growth. He pursues it, not out of insecurity, but out of discipline. He understands that consistency without reflection is just ego in autopilot. So let me ask you, who are you, really? The man you were 5 years ago, or the one you are brave enough to become now? Because identity isn't a monument, it's a forge. And the man who stops evolving doesn't preserve himself, he petrifies. That's just who I am might feel honest, but often it's the most dishonest thing we can tell ourselves. Part 3, everybody does it. It's one of the easiest things to say and one of the most dangerous to believe. Everybody does it. It sounds harmless, even logical. But underneath, it's a quiet surrender, a way to justify cutting corners, avoiding effort, or turning a blind eye. Because if everyone else is doing it, who am I to be different? There was a guy I used to work with. His name was Eric. He was a systems engineer, sharp on paper, efficient with deadlines. But when it came to accountability, Eric had one line he used like armor. Look, nobody double checks that stuff. Everyone skips it. One day a major server crashed, costing the company thousands in lost time. The audit showed that he'd ignored a safety protocol. When confronted, he didn't even blink. "Come on," he said. "Everyone ignores that. It's not just me." And maybe he was right. Maybe others had ignored it too. But here's the catch. He was the one standing in the ashes. Stoic philosophy doesn't measure you against the crowd. It measures you against your own potential. Marcus Aurelius didn't ask, "What's everyone else doing?" He asked, "What is the right thing to do, even if no one sees it?" The truth is, "everybody does it" is a phrase people use when they don't want to hold the line anymore, when doing the right thing starts to feel inconvenient. But that's exactly when it matters most. Because integrity isn't built when it's easy. It's built when it would be easier to look the other way, and you don't. We live in a time when cutting corners has become normalized, where mediocrity gets shrugged off because that's just how it is. But the Stoic doesn't lower his standard to blend in. He sharpens it, precisely because the world around him won't. Seneca once wrote, "If you live according to nature, you will never be poor. If you live according to opinion, you will never be rich." What he meant wasn't about money. He meant that chasing the approval of the crowd will leave you bankrupt in character. So let me ask you, when you say everybody does it, who are you really trying to convince? Them or yourself? Because every time you lean on that phrase, you're trading your principles for permission, and slowly you stop being someone others can rely on and become someone they quietly work around. A Stoic man doesn't care what everyone else is doing. He cares what's right. He holds a line. And even if he stands alone, he stands solid. Part 4, real men don't talk about feelings. There's a phrase that's been passed down like an heirloom in many households, especially for men. Real men don't talk about feelings. It's said with pride, with a grin, sometimes with a shrug. But behind those 4 words, there's a long trail of broken connections, silent suffering, and unspoken regret. Let me tell you about James. On paper, he had it all. A successful entrepreneur, respected in his field, sharp in every meeting, always calm under pressure. But he had one rule: never show emotion, no matter what. He believed silence was strength. He didn't cry when his mother died, didn't flinch when the market crashed, never raised his voice, never opened up. He wore stoicism like armor, but it wasn't real stoicism. It was emotional suppression. Then one afternoon during a strategy session, James collapsed. A stroke, brought on by years of chronic stress, internalized anxiety, and never asking for help. In the hospital, he told a close friend, "I spent my life building a legacy, but I never built a place where I could rest." That hit me, because so many men believe that feelings are a threat to masculinity, that showing pain makes them weak. But it's not weakness to feel, it's weakness to deny. And the Stoics knew that. Marcus Aurelius, one of the most powerful emperors in history, wrote openly about his grief, his doubts, his fear of failure. He didn't broadcast them, but he faced them. And that's the difference. Stoicism doesn't say don't feel, It says, don't be ruled by feeling. There's a difference between control and denial. One makes you stronger, the other corrodes you from within. When a man never expresses what he carries, those emotions don't disappear. They just fester. They become anger, addiction, or emotional distance. And slowly the man becomes a stranger to everyone, including himself. The truth is, real strength isn't staying silent. It's speaking with command, not to complain, but to connect. To be able to say, I'm carrying something heavy and still stand tall. So if you've been told that real men don't talk about feelings, ask yourself, where has that belief brought you? Closer to others or further away? Stronger or just more numb? A stoic man isn't afraid of his emotions. He just refuses to let them run wild. He doesn't act from impulse. He responds from clarity. And that clarity begins when you stop hiding what hurts. You don't need to cry in front of strangers, but you do need to stop pretending you feel nothing. Because silence can protect you, but it can also bury you. Part 5, I deserve better. I deserve better. At first glance, it sounds like self-respect, like a man who knows his worth. But listen closely, and often what you'll hear is something else entirely. Resentment disguised as righteousness. There's a difference between knowing your value and demanding reward. One is grounded in character. The other is built on quiet bitterness. I remember someone I used to coach, his name was Carl, a mid-level manager who had been passed over for promotion 3 times. Each time he grew more frustrated. He worked hard, showed up, did his job. But whenever we talked, he would say the same thing, I deserve better than this. But here's what he wasn't doing: mentoring younger staff, developing new skills, or taking initiative beyond what was required. He wasn't sharpening, he was waiting for recognition, for applause, for life to hand him something more. That's not stoicism, that's entitlement, and it will quietly rot the soul of any man who clings to it. Marcus Aurelius put it bluntly, do not waste time wondering what a good man should be. Be one. The Stoic doesn't walk through life with a list of what he's owed. He walks with a code. He builds his worth through unseen labor, quiet effort, and internal alignment. Whether the world notices or not, that's not the point. The man who constantly repeats, I deserve better, is often doing less than he believes and expecting more than he's earned. He's confusing discomfort with injustice and dissatisfaction with growth. But growth isn't about getting what you want. It's about becoming who you admire, even when no one claps for it. So ask yourself, are you building in silence or complaining in circles? Are you showing up with excellence or showing up with expectations? Stoic men don't crave validation. They cultivate virtue. They don't ask, when will I be rewarded? They ask, have I done the work that makes me worthy, regardless of outcome? Seneca said, it is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it. And one of the greatest wastes is time spent feeling entitled to rewards for effort never truly made. So the next time those words rise up, I deserve better, stop. Don't suppress them, but don't submit to them either. Redirect them. Say this instead, I will become better. I will build something better. I will be someone who earns it, whether anyone notices or not. Because in the Stoic world, dignity isn't found in what you demand. It's found in what you develop. Part 6, it's not my fault. It's not I fault. 4 simple words, and yet they carry the power to quietly destroy a man's sense of ownership, direction, and dignity. I once met a man named Brian, late 40s, a sharp mind, tons of experience, used to run a mid-sized company. But after a few bad quarters and a rough economy, he was forced to step down. Every time we spoke after that, he repeated the same phrase like a mantra. It wasn't my fault. The market crashed. My team didn't deliver. My investors bailed. And maybe he was right, partially. But here's what struck me. Every sentence pointed outward, never inward. Never once did he ask, what could I have done differently? Over time, Brian didn't just lose his business. He lost his voice, his influence, his ability to lead even himself. Because when you constantly blame the world, you eventually convince yourself you have no power left in it. That's why the Stoics rejected the blame game. Epictetus said, it's not events that disturb us, but our opinion about them. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Blame is easy. It feels good in the moment. It keeps our ego clean, but it kills initiative. It convinces us that we are permanent victims in a world we don't control. And once that mindset takes root, it spreads into relationships, into work, into self-worth. The man who always says, it's not my fault, will eventually become invisible. Not because the world is cruel, but because he's chosen to step out of the driver's seat. But the Stoic man, he asks a harder question. What can I control right now? Not tomorrow, not when the economy stabilizes, not when someone apologizes, right now. Because there's always something, your focus, your habits, your tone, your next move. And that small shift in mindset from blame to responsibility changes everything. It doesn't mean the world is fair. It doesn't deny injustice, but it refuses to give your power away to what's outside your reach. So the next time something falls apart and you feel that sentence rising, it's not my fault, catch it, pause, and replace it with this. It's now my responsibility. Because that's what separates a man who stays bitter from a man who grows better. Not perfection, not fairness, just a willingness to own the next move. Part 7, that's not my job. That's not my job. At first, it sounds like a healthy boundary, like someone who knows where their responsibilities begin and end. But when you hear it too often from the same person, it stops sounding like clarity and starts sounding like quiet retreat. There was a man named Rich. He drove a school bus in a small Midwestern town. Every day he picked up and dropped off dozens of kids, always on time, always polite. But one afternoon, a parent called the school. Her son had come home shaken, clearly bullied by some older kids during the ride. When the school asked Rich what had happened, he simply said, "That's not my job. I just drive." And technically, he was right. But in the deeper sense, in the human sense, he wasn't. Because what he really meant was, I saw something wrong, but I chose to look away. You see, when men shrink their presence to the bare minimum, something inside them begins to wither. They stop stepping in. They stop standing up. They trade usefulness for comfort, responsibility for detachment, until eventually they are no longer protectors, leaders, or examples. They're just functionaries, quiet, invisible, and replaceable. The Stoics never lived by duty alone. They lived by purpose. Marcus Aurelius asked himself daily, what is your vocation? To be a good man. Not a man who hides behind his role, but one who fills the gap that needs to be filled. There will always be tasks you weren't assigned. Moments that aren't technically your job, But the Stoic doesn't measure himself by what's written in a job description. He measures himself by what is needed, by what is right. And that takes courage. Because when you show up fully, you risk inconvenience. You invite judgment. You stretch past your comfort zone. But in doing so, you build something most men never touch, depth. So let me ask you this. Are you living like a title or like a presence? Are you only doing what's asked, or are you becoming someone others can quietly count on? The Stoic man doesn't wait to be told. He sees, he acts, not to impress, not to be a hero, but because he understands this truth. Your influence doesn't grow from what you avoid. It grows from what you embrace, especially when no one's watching. Because a man who always says, "That's not my job," may protect his time, but he loses his impact. And when your impact disappears, so does your legacy. Part 8. It is what it is. It is what it is. We've all said it, sometimes with a shrug, sometimes to comfort ourselves. But let's be honest, how often is that phrase a sign of true acceptance? And how often is it quiet surrender? I used to know a man named Tom. He was a jazz pianist, brilliant in his youth, played late-night bars in Chicago, opened for names you'd recognize. But after a few failed gigs, some harsh reviews, and a changing industry, he stopped. He told me, "The world moved on. My time passed. It is what it is." At first, I nodded. It sounded peaceful, mature, but over time, I realized something deeper. Tom hadn't truly accepted life's turns. He had given up, not with anger, not with drama, but with indifference. And that, my friend, is the most dangerous resignation of all. Stoicism teaches us to accept what we cannot control, but it never asks us to abandon what we can. There's a difference between composure and capitulation. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." That's not a permission slip to disengage, that's a call to rise. When a man says it is what it is, too often he means, "I don't want to try anymore." He hides behind the illusion of peace while his fire quietly dies out. And here's the truth. Resignation can feel comfortable. Numbness can look like wisdom. But both are just masks worn by the parts of us that don't want to get hurt again. Ask yourself, have I really accepted this situation? Or have I simply stopped caring? Because the Stoic doesn't deny pain, failure, or loss. He doesn't pretend the world is fair, but he never stops responding. He doesn't drown in emotion, nor does he drift into apathy. He stands between the two, clear-eyed, awake, deliberate. Tom's story isn't unique. There are millions of men just like him. Men who once burned with purpose, who now live quietly in neutral. They don't fall, they fade. And that's the greater tragedy, not that life hurt them, but that they stop showing up. So the next time you catch yourself saying it is what it is, pause. Ask, is this calm or is this collapse? Is this peace or is it fatigue? Because you still have one sacred power, your response. And when you choose it with intention, you reignite something vital. Jinsi, the Stoic doesn't accept blindly. He accepts with clarity and then acts with precision. Because even when life can't be changed, you can still choose how you show up within it. Every man builds something with his words, a future, a reputation, a mindset, or a slow descent into the ordinary. And most of the time, it doesn't happen in one moment. It happens one sentence at a time. We think words are just noise, just filler. But over time, the words you repeat, especially when no one's listening, become the blueprint of who you are. Whether you mean them or not, whether they were said in anger or silence, they shape the man you become. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." But let's take it one step further. The soul becomes etched by the weight of your words. They aren't just echoes, they're tools. They build up or they wear down. They open doors or they lock them shut. Think about the phrases we've talked about. That's just who I am. I deserve better. It's not my fault. They don't scream weakness. They whisper it until one day it becomes the story you live in. Not because it's true, but because you gave it permission to stay. The Stoic doesn't use language to decorate. He uses it to reflect. Every word is chosen not to impress, but to express discipline, integrity, clarity. And when he's silent, that silence carries weight because it comes from understanding, not avoidance. If you've ever caught yourself saying any of these phrases, don't be ashamed. Don't beat yourself up. That's not the point. The point is this: you get to choose the next line. You can say, that's just life. Or you can say, I still have a choice. You can say, I'm not that kind of man. Or you can say, I'm becoming a better one. You can say, it is what it is. Or you can say, this is where I begin again. Because you're not just speaking into the world, you're speaking into yourself. So the next time you open your mouth, pause. Ask, is this a weapon or a cage? Because your words are either building your freedom or burying it. And if something in this video resonated with you, don't let it stop here. Take a moment, reflect. Choose one phrase to leave behind and one stronger one to replace it. Then share this video with someone who might need that same shift. Subscribe if you haven't already. We're building a place where men speak with purpose and live with weight. This isn't just philosophy. This is a way to reclaim your voice and your life. And it starts with one sentence worth saying.